and good evening if you're elsewhere in the country. I've been asked to do a webinar on cage shoe modifications. And what I decided to do was something a little bit different, to make a clip and how to rocker a shoe. I've decided to make this cage shoe modification a little more relevant to shoeing. What we shoes are gait abnormalities that normally one would see in handmade shoes. So I'm going to focus on modifying cage shoes to meet conformation or lameness issues. Knows that. Now, as we go through this program, all the shoes that were here were made by my students here at Pacific Coast Horseshoeing School. So these are shoes that we use in the program and that our students make. So the rocker toe, this is just a standard cage shoe modification that probably all of you have experienced. The toe can be rockered either over the anvil edge or over the horn. The rocker toe, however, is traditionally placed between the first and second nail hole, like in these pictures. It's claimed that it enhances breakover. There's still some question about whether a well-trimmed, well-dressed foot has that much of an effect on it. But the problem with the rocker toe, of course, is that if a horse has any conformation defect, for instance, toed out, as to where it's going to enhance breakover. It doesn't enhance breakover where the horse breaks over, which will probably be around the medial, the inside #1 nail hole. So for that, we'd like to use a half-round shoe. Now, talking to the Horseshoe Barn, which is our farrier supply out here, we note that not a lot of guys are using these shoes, but this is the shoe that will allow. It's just a half-round shoe. Several different companies make those. It's in essence giving a rocker toe completely around the foot. And although this isn't much of a modification, it is a change from traditional shoeing. The downside to a rocker toe, to a half-round shoe, is that it cannot direct breakover to a specific area. So if I have a horse that is severely toed out, he's winging in and potentially interfering, a half-round shoe wouldn't be what I'd want to use, because that would not discourage breakover at that #1 nail hole and might lend to the interfering. But this is a shoe that can be used most of the times in place of a rocker shoe. Pre-clip shoes. Again, this is not a modification, but it's a real problem with cage shoes. Clips have been the mainstay of our profession for lots of years. But now most of the cage shoe manufacturers have come up with pre-clipped shoes. And they relieve the farrier of forging good-looking symmetrical clips. But they've created a serious problem if the clips are not set properly in the foot. To the foot. So that when you rub your hand around the hoof wall, you can't tell where the hoof ends and the clip begins. It's embedded in the hoof wall. This is a really important factor that is missed by a lot of guys using a pre-clipped shoe. This is how they fall, so that when you hot seat the clip in, it embeds itself into the wall. Unfortunately, this is what we get a lot. Guys are taking these clips and bending them out in order to fit their shoe. And then they're going to hammer those clips in. Hammering a clip in can have some disastrous effects to feet. We strongly advise that you don't get into this habit. When you smoke a clip into a foot, you secure the shoe onto the foot. Embedded in the foot without any pressure placed upon the hoof capsule. When you take a hammer and close that clip in, one of two things may occur. If you miss the clip even once and you strike the wall, you can create a little blood blister between the wall and the sensitive laminae. The lameness will manifest itself much like an abscess, except when you pare out the bottom of the foot, the sole, you're unable to find an abscess site. But there is an abscess. There's going to be a grade 4 some. The second part is that prolonged use of hammered-in clips. Over a period of several years, radiographic evidence is going to show that the solar margin surface of P3 is going to start having a small indentation from the pressure that's applied to those to the foot through pounding in the clips. It's constant pressure for the full 8-week cycle, and it starts to remodel the coffin bone. So I strongly advise that you do not hammer your clips in. If you're doing that now, start hot seating them. You'll find it's a much better fit. Here's a shoe that we use lots and lots of. 2 methods of making your square toe and trailer when you're going to modify a keg shoe for this. One, which is the shoe on the left of your screen. That shoe has one size larger and has the medial heel cut. If you're using a clipped shoe, a hind pattern clipped shoe to make your trailer, I advise that you use a bigger shoe and cut the medial heel. That way your clips are not askew. They're centered on the foot correctly and not one forward and one far back. The other method is going to be to shift the shoe. Now when you shift the toe of the shoe over to build your trailer, to give it a little bit more length on that lateral branch, what you do is you shift your nail holes. And so once 8 nail holes, or the first 3 on each side, your nails are going to sit forward on the medial side and a little far back on the lateral side. Now it doesn't make much of a difference to the horse, but I think it doesn't look like quality work. And so I advise using a one size larger shoe and then using a extra length on the medial side to be able to fit your shoe much better. Now here's something you can do for horses that wear their shoes unevenly. If you're shoeing a horse and his foot is 90 degrees to the bone column, you've done a nice flat trim, you come back 8 weeks later and the shoe's worn much like this one, where one branch is worn a little bit thinner than the other branch. And you double check your foot. Next trimming, you trim 90 degrees to the bone column, nice and flat, take extra care, and the shoe still wears this way. You've got a problem that you need to address with the shoe. Now, I caution you against trying to drop that side that's wearing excessively. Instead, you have to start sticking some steel out. Now, you don't have to worry about making a handmade shoe to do this. You can take a medial balanced shoe where you're starting to stick steel inside or out. Here's an example of a shoe that was fit full to the medial side on this particular horse. When you take a shoe to fit it full, a factory-made shoe, a keg shoe to fit it full, your nail holes move out. If you try to nail it, you're going to be nailing into the wall, not the white line. You're going to create a cracked foot, and when that horse loses a shoe, he's going to pull a bunch of wall off with it as well. So what we want to do is try to distribute that weight evenly on that foot and up the limb by moving the shoe to the side that wears excessively. We can take that and use our 4-punch Pritchel and put in nail holes a little more to the inside of the foot, punch them pretty coarse, and then we can nail to the white line and still allow the shoe to extend. Now when you're repunching these, remember that you have the ability to repunch these for any size nail you want. So if you have a horse, let's say on a front end of a horse that's got offset knees, the medial wall is going to be very thin. You might want to use a race nail, at least a slim nail. Therefore, you're able to punch new nail holes and for the appropriate nail you want to use for that foot. Now, when you build these shoes, make sure that you have a lot of heat when you use your of that shoe. You can't address those. If you try to pound those out like you would a handmade shoe, you're going to end up elongating your nail hole, messing it up, and it's going to be a continuing struggle, and you won't be happy. So just let those little frog eyes stick out, and you'll be able to drive your nails and fit that as full as that horse needs until at the end of 8 weeks, that shoe is wearing evenly. An onion shoe. This is one that's not used very often, and we like to use it in the school to show the students how to use this particular shoe. Lots of horses with palmar heel pain. Lots of horses that have heel pain for a variety of reasons. An onion shoe is used to support that back 1/3 of the foot. If a foot is trimmed properly, then you can use the bars of the foot to be able to support some of the weight of the horse and take it off the heels and the wall. So the keys is to leave yourself a good healthy bar. Too many farriers gut the bars of these feet when they're trimming them, and the bar is not there to be used. This picture on the left shows a nice flat bar. On every trim that you do, every time you prep a foot, or either for shoes or to leave barefoot, the bars should stick out at least 3/4 of an inch level with the hoof wall. Remember, these bars, again, are a continuation of the hoof wall, and they're a support mechanism. To take your knife and gut them, like the one on the right, takes a lot of the stability of the heels away. And in doing so, you can lead to some palmar heel pain all on your own just by weakening the foot by pulling out those bars. If you leave the bars nice and full, 3/4 to an inch out level with the hoof wall, then you're able to use an onion shoe to support the weight of the horse on the bars of trimming the feet this way. You still have those sulcus where you're able to use those to wrap acrylic tape, the fiberglass cloth around, and use the bars as a stabilizing point for quarter cracks. If you gut them, they're not there when you need them. So the onion shoe is one that you can make out of a keg shoe. That's just using the round part of your hammer and pulling those little onion pieces out. Remember to do this on the foot surface, so that on the ground surface rather, so the foot surface has got the support. And you see the shoe on the right, when you flip it over, this will take a lot of pressure off those heels, and sometimes that's all you need to do and to show some relief in a lot of horses. You guys that have some horses have been diagnosed just recently navicular. As you know, that's something that just veterinarians grab all the time. Try an onion shoe on the foot and see if you can get some improvement. Lateral heel extension. This is a really, really handy shoe, particularly for you guys that work in horses that do anything in arenas. This shoe can be handmade, or if you're shoeing with keg shoes, you can use a creaser or a fuller out are going to benefit from a shoe like this, particularly those arena horses. No matter what we ask a horse to do, he has to engage his back end. Something as simple to shift his weight to the back. Well, if the horse is toed out and or base narrow, when he engages his back end, he's going to fall to that lateral heel. That lateral heel is going to sink into the dirt. Further that lateral heel sinks, the straighter the limb becomes. You take the angulation out of the hock and the stifle a little bit, and you kind of sting them, and they get reluctant to work off of that back end. So a wide web shoe is best used for this application. You're going to take the fullering tool or a creaser, and you're just going to run that creaser several times, a couple different grooves, in order to widen that branch. And then you're going to want to hammer box that so that it's not going to be stepped off by a horse next to him. Before you use a shoe like this, along with a square toe and trailer, before you start sticking anything on the outside of a horse, be a detective. Find out exactly how trailered. I've got a horse where I'm going to put this lateral heel extension or a trailer on. This horse is traveled in a stock trailer, no center divide, side by side with another horse. This shoe's coming off, and it's coming off very quickly. And you can end up with a stifle injury as that horse is trying to pull his foot free from the other horse stepping on him. So make sure that you play detective on this before you just slam these shoes on a horse. A rim shoe. Lots of times you need a rim shoe and you don't have them in your truck. You can create a rim shoe out of a keg shoe by just fullering or creasing. A fullering, of course, is a tool that's used to fit a specific nail head. A creaser just makes a groove, and you can use either one for this application. If I've got each a little bit, I check my balance well, and the first thing I want to do is put a rim shoe on the back end. I want to see if I can slow the back end down a bit. If I don't have the appropriate rim shoe in stock, I'm able to take a fullering or creaser and run that through the heels and across the toe and create a rim shoe out of just a plain keg shoe. This gets to be a little trickier when you got a pre-clip shoe, but hallelujah for the hardy hole. Stick your clip in the hardy hole and then start to run around the toe, and you shouldn't have much of a problem. On a smaller shoe, the double aughts, you may end up having to do just half that fullering across the toe with one clip in the hardy hole and then move it over to the other side. But you should be able to get yourself a nice much of a problem. Here's what you need. This is not a really good picture, kind of a fuzzy picture, but you'll get the idea. This is what you need to do if you're going to start doing some modifications on keg shoes for therapeutic type shoeings, where you don't have to build handmade shoes. These are little AC welders. They run about $300. You can buy them at Home Depot and Lowe's. Lincoln makes this little one, and they plug into household circuitry. So every barn that has a plug, you'll be able to use this. Just a regular 120 AC plugs in. Now these welders will tell you that they really are not capable of welding any more than about 1/8 of an inch. That's the max capacity on these. And so you would think that that would not work for us as farriers, but we have a forge. So our ability to preheat a shoe and also to bevel some ends to have a less thickness at the welding point means that we're able to use this welder quite handily for any kind of application that we've got on our shoes. This can sit in your truck. You can pull this thing out, and we'll show you a variety of shoes that you can make that lots of folks think are advanced therapeutic shoes that only those journeyman farriers that hand make shoes are capable of dealing with. One's going to be a straight bar shoe. Now, a straight bar shoe is a shoe that has many applications. Anytime a veterinarian wants a bar shoe to stabilize the foot, but the horse continues to pull it off, you're going to have a straight bar. Now, because straight bars are difficult to build exactly to the foot, a lot of guys just shy away from them. Stabilizing quarter cracks, crushed heel, lots of applications for a straight bar shoe. Take a standard keg shoe, build that to fit the foot. Heels, take out your little handy dandy welder, heat up the shoe, run a bead across both sides. If your welds don't look good, if they look like bird poop, put them back in the forge, bring them back out, and smooth them out with a hammer. A little grinder is fine. That welder can be used by someone who has absolutely no welding experience. The little wire feed welder, and in a half an hour of practicing, you'll be able to make these kind of modified shoes. For a little frog plate, just take the round part of your hammer and just pull it out, just like you're starting a little bit of a clip. And you've got a straight bar shoe. It may not be as spiffy as the handmade shoes, but the horse doesn't care. It's going to do the job you need it to do. Another shoe that can be used is going to be a Z-bar shoe. And that Z-bar can be just a variety of shapes. Sometimes you come in at the fourth nail hole, third, second, it just depends on your application. But it's relatively simple to make in that you just start to thin out one branch and bring it in. This particular application was for a horse. We just took the shoe, thinned out that branch, and then cut a little piece of bar stock, welded the bar stock together, and now we've got a therapeutic shoe, a Z-bar shoe, that runs across the foot and relieves that entire medial heel. All done with that little welder and a little 4-inch grinder to make your welds look much, much better. Here's a modified Z-bar. It's an aggressive one. This was a horse that had an infected quarter crack. The veterinarian wanted to leave it open while it was treated. It can be done with a keg shoe Z-bar, just exactly like the one we showed previously. You don't have to run away from this therapeutic type shoeing just because you forgot how to make really spiffy handmade shoes. You can do that with this little welder. Shoe to stabilize the foot, take pressure off one area. It's similar to the Z-bar. Again, you're using a keg shoe. You're just going to cut off one branch with a chisel hardy, put in a piece of bar stock, and weld it together. Now you've got a shoe that's going to alleviate pain on one heel or another. Very good shoe for a horse that's got medial corns, just has some bruising, that needs to have some relief, but they can't go barefoot. Again, just a matter of modifying a keg shoe, putting in a piece of bar stock, and welding. The mushroom shoe. This is one that's got bilateral corns. That's we had used this before. This is a shoe that's a keg shoe modified. Again, you can see where you just put the shoe down and taper from the third nail hole back. And then you end up welding a small little plate in that supports the weight onto the frog. Lateral and medial heels. It's a useful shoe for horses that have that palmar heel pain in there. Give it a whirl. It doesn't take that much to build. Hard bar shoes. You're going to hear Dr. Esco Buffs coming up next talking. Great way to do that is just to weld these hard bars in. Just take a piece of bar stock, fold it, draw it out so that the width of your frog, and then weld them to a keg shoe. Hard bar has many, many applications besides founder. It's a great shoe to use for horses when you're trying to take pressure off the wall. Hard bars are for quarter cracks. They can be used for any kind of palmar heel pain. Besides the application for founder, they're great on very flat-footed horses. Hard bar is an excellent shoe to use for a horse that's got crushed, collapsed, underrun heels. They just can't seem to come out. You can put a hard bar shoe on, let them put a little pressure onto the frog to support some weight, float those heels, and let them grow back without some pressure. So it's a shoe that's not used as much as it should be used because of the difficulty in making it. Keg shoe, take a piece of bar stock and turn it into itself and pull out your frog plate and just weld it on. It works great. You can even do so much as a Patten Bar Shoe. We were out in the field. The horse had a serious injury with the flexor tendons. Veterinary done the surgery. They wanted a Patten Bar Shoe. Well, I'll tell you, making those things to fit a specific foot takes practice. If you haven't done them in a long time, you're going to be out there for a couple of days. Get a cake shoe. You're going to cut 3 pieces of bar stock, and you're going to weld them in. This Patten Bar Shoe, this horse wore this Patten Bar Shoe for 6 weeks, and we reset it for pads. Worked great. Doesn't look as pretty as these journeyman farriers in their handmade shoes, but it's a lot faster, and it was pretty accurate, and the horse didn't mind. Now here's some shoes that you can make, and this comes off the work of Dr. Jean-Marie Denois. He developed a process for being able to shoe horses with asymmetrical shoes. You'll see the Grand Circuit carries these shoes, aluminum shoes on the right. And this helps arena horses. These are shoe-ins that are specific to arena horses. So let's say a horse a little cow-hocked. A cow-hocked horse in the back, a cow-hocked horse now, is going to load the outside or lateral aspect of the hock joint. And he's going to open or stretch the inside, the medial aspect of that joint. So on that horse, you would expect to see some bone problems on the lateral aspect of the hock side. The concept behind this shoe is that for an arena horse, you would use a wide web shoe, or as you can see on the left, a pad cut diagonally on the medial side to allow the medial side to float in the arena. The narrower branch without the pad on the lateral side would cause it to sink. Now this is going to cause the hock to load more evenly. And it's a wonderful thing to do to these horses. Now the Grand Circuit shoes you can buy, the aluminum shoes like you see on there, or you can try it with the horse by using just a flat pad. You put a flat pad on, secure it at the heels, take a knife out, cut it a diagonal across, put some Equithane soft set underneath that pad, and put them out in the arena, and you'll see a significant difference in the way that horse travels. Now, this doesn't work on trails or hard surfaces, but it's a wonderful shoe to try to see if it works on your horses that are arena horses. That same Grand Circuit has a reverse shoe that you put on, you know, on backwards. You can do the same with just a. The concept behind this is that when the horse is in the arena, the toe is going to sink a lot more into the sand, the soft surface, than the heels, because we've got a pad going across the heels. It's going to float it. This is going to relieve pressure on the flexor tendons by allowing the heels to stay elevated. Works great with horses. Lessen horses that the scar tissue is becoming difficult for you to shoe and keep sound. Suspensory problems. Boy, here's one that suspensory injuries that we just never seem to get right. I don't know how many times I've had veterinarians say that on a horse with an injured suspensory, they want an egg bar and a wedge pad, which is totally contraindicated. For those horses that are like lesson horses, again, in arena and soft ground, use a keg shoe and put your pad across the toe. This is going to allow the toe to float. The pastern comes up. That relieves pressure on the suspensory ligament. And those lesson horses that have blown suspensories that are just sore, you can put those back into horses that make money for the owners with just a simple little modification. Well, I hope you got a lot out of that. If you got any questions, I'd be the handmade wizard in order to be able to help a lot of horses with therapeutic shoes. Thanks a lot.
Okay. We'll leave your screen up, Bob, in case there are any questions where we need a recall of the shoes. I know there's been some audio problems for some people. The sound at times would sporadically jump out for a couple of seconds. So in case there is something you missed from Bob in terms of something he needs to elaborate on, please type that question now. We'll be able to address it before we move on. So with that, we'll start getting into some questions. And Bob, with your students, what's the most common corrective need that you're finding with the horses you work with?
Well, the most corrective that we do is going to be supporting that outside, that lateral heel on most horses that are base narrow toed out, which seems to be, oh, probably 70–80% of the horses that we shoe are going to be.
Yep, sorry, Bob, you cut out there for a second. Could you repeat that?
Yeah, I don't. What is that on my end? I wonder.
Yeah, I'm afraid your connection's a little spotty tonight, but we'll work through it.
Wow. Okay. Um,
All right. Well.
or an extension.
Okay. All right. Let's. Somebody asked for a little elaboration here when you're talking about lateral heel extensions. It cut out a bit when you were talking about being a detective. Could you explain that a little bit about the need to be a detective?
What you've got to be able to do with these horses is find out where the problems are. You've got to play a detective in finding out whether this horse is creating his gait abnormality or lameness issue in soft arena on hard surfaces. Until you find out what the horse is doing, it's going to be difficult to come up with any kind of solution.
Okay. Here's another question for you, Bob. What do you think of creating a lateral extension in the same way that one creates an onion heel? Just pushing steel toward the lateral side by pounding ground surface of the inside
Okay.
web with round side of the hammer.
Oh, okay. That works a little bit well, but the problem that you're having with that is that you're having to thin and taper that, and so if you use that too aggressively, you're going to end up with a thinner piece of metal, and you're going to end up with a shoe that actually makes them fall a little bit to that thin side.
Okay, going back to the asymmetrical shoe, you pointed out the cow-hocked horse loads on the lateral side. What kind of damage do you see long-term on the medial side?
Well, that's going to start out with just soft tissue. You're going to have some medial collateral ligament damage is what's going to usually happen on the medial aspect of that hock. That starts creating some pretty good soreness, uh, and just an overall malaise with that fibrous joint capsule stretching, and you're going to get some bog spabbing, some swelling going on before you start having some arthritic changes laterally.
Okay. Okay, here's a question for a little bit of elaboration where sound cut out. Going back to Flexor support in the arena, what kind of horses did you find this to be most effective with?
We use those on a lot of thoroughbreds that retired from the track for bowed tendons, and now we're having some problems in the flexors altogether with the heel sinking a little. Or you find those work very well for horses that have check ligament, subcarpal check ligament injuries, where you need to be able to float the back of that heel without jacking them up with bunches of wedge pads and making them